Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and the macabre. And your host is me, Bob Dale. And as always, I'm recording in the Settle Inn. For the first time, however, since I started doing this by myself, I have been relegated to the cellar, as always. So if you hear my teeth chattering in the middle of this, you'll know why. It is still freezing in here. Anyway, I hope everybody's good. We're going to rattle through this one. This is a bit of a fun episode. And my challenge has been set this week by another very good friend of the show, Raymond, who runs 5 and 30 with Ruck. And 5 and 30 is a fun wee podcast where he talks to other creators and he asks them 5 questions that are set at random. So if anybody fancies sending Raymond some questions, I'll put the link for submission up in the episode title. And Raymond's been very kind to me, shall we say, with the submission. He's been a long-time listener and knew that I had something in the pipeline and has been very kind enough, not that I asked him to, might I add, to send me a challenge that has lent itself to reading a story I wanted to do anyway, which is very good of you. Thank you very much, Raymond. Of course, before we get to that, last week's episode on high heels, which was good fun, and I hope everybody who listened enjoyed it. Drop us a line if you enjoyed that one, or if any thoughts or queries or questions on it, and let us know, and I'll see what I can do about answering them. But if you listened to last week's episode, you'll know it was set by Tara and Jess from 3 Spooked Girls, which is an excellent podcast. And getting this chat done was a time zone challenge, shall we say. One of the 3 Spooked Girls, Tara, is in Alaska, and Jess is in California. Now, they fight a 1 hour time difference when they're doing their recordings, which I thought, that'll be fine. We'll sort it all out. Except when you work it out, it's about 10 hours time difference for us. So the girls kindly agreed to join me in their morning and my evening to do a recording. And this was their thoughts. Well, hello, Jess and Tara. How are you guys?
Hi, good.
I'm well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. I'm, having a party of a Friday night in my kitchen on my own, but that's fine. I don't mind it. It does mean I'm drinking on another night this week, which seems to be what happens when I started podcasting. Was I just started drinking more?
Oh, there you go.
It's not bad.
We know that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's that bad a thing, so don't worry about it.
We can definitely relate to that. I think our alcohol consumption went up when we started podcasting as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's fine. Well, you guys are very used to doing this. You guys record at a distance all the time, don't you?
Yeah, yes. Twice a week.
How far apart are you?
We're at least a time zone.
Yeah. I'm in Alaska and Jessica is in California, so it's like an all-day journey when I fly down. So I usually do a layover in Seattle and then fly on down to where she's at.
That's mad. and when Nadine and I were talking about recording from Glasgow to Stirling, which is literally 35 miles, we're like, that's going to be tricky. So hats off to you guys. I haven't said you are your podcast yet. Sorry about that. You guys host 3 Spooked Girls, which is, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, because I've said it several times on the internet, is one of my favorite podcasts. So thank you very much for producing it. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you for listening. We, of course, we put it out for people to listen to. So it's exciting when another podcaster listens to us as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's one of my favorite things about not only the Discord group, but the kind of online friends, I don't know what you call it, these online acquaintances we've all made, is when another person that decides to take their time to create something, listens to something that you've created and enjoys it, is to me a massive compliment, because they understand what you're doing. So yeah, 3 Spooked Girls.
Yeah.
How would you guys describe your podcast?
How would we describe our podcast? Well, I mean, we are a paranormal podcast that's heavy on the true crime as well. We just like to talk about all sorts of crazy things, and along the lines of you, where we talk about these insane, crazy people who commit these crimes that you're just like, what were you doing?
Yeah, perfect. That sounds ace. And that is exactly why when I came up with the mad new format for Twisted Britain, I had a list of people that I had to get on board, and you guys were like, well, what third episode? You were way up that list, so you can know you were always top 10 no matter what happens.
Aw, thank you.
So
I was super excited because I love your show. You're one of my regular rotations every time you come out.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you set me what was the only challenge I've had so far that I had to go, oh shit, right, okay. And luckily, I was chatting it over with Leslie, who is the boss of the Settle-In, and she went, oh, I read this weird thing the other day, and I went, well, that's the perfect start. Anything that's weird, I'm good with. And if it's not one I've heard of, tends to be the kind of twisted stories. So I went with it, which was the lovely tale of Tracy Seward, who was a nasty, nasty piece of work, if I think is the easiest way.
Oh my God, was she?
Yeah, seriously. Even without the murder, like, you can do what you want, but no, leave the animals alone. Don't do that.
Yeah, that was the only controversial bit when I was putting it out there. When I did the cat burglar episode for Bethan from Seeing Red, I immediately stayed away from animal torture. And then, of course, 2 episodes later, I'm like, oh, great. Now we're just stamping on animals in stiletto heels. That sounds great. Well done, Bob.
Sorry. That's our fault, I guess.
Well, yeah. Okay.
And that kind of says more to Americans, because there are so many cases out there where women have assaulted men with stilettos in the U.S. or high heels. So we were like, oh, this shouldn't be a problem at all. And then apparently just people in the UK are a better caliber of individuals and don't kill people with stilettos.
You say that, but she did stand on invertebrates and then case her husband, common law husband, in concrete. So
this is true. I mean, you have one, whereas we have, but she was
many.
Extreme.
Yeah.
She went.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
like when I heard the animal part, I was just like, "Aw, she just needs to be burned." Like,
yeah, I agree, absolutely. What was interesting was when I stuck in, because my instant reaction when I've been getting these challenges, or actually for the whole of Twisted Britain, is I just stick in a couple of random words and stick crime after it and see what happens on the old Tinterweb. And everything that came up when you stick in high heel or stiletto or, in fact, women's shoes crime was a spate of mad killings in America where folk were ramming high heels through people's eyeballs and stuff. And I was like, fuck, you guys are weird.
A little bit.
I mean, it's actually like one of the things they tell women to do when they are being attacked by someone is to use your shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that's like why there's a higher increase, or women are just like, this looks like a weapon.
I mean, it seems to be an effective tool. So I can understand that. And I must say that reading the stats online from the UK kind of police forces, there is definitely a rise in it. So I think we'll catch you up. Don't worry about that. Whereas actually here, women are just told to go to the bar and ask for Angela, and they get help rather than stabbing people in the face. It's different culture.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that like a code word thing? Like, you need help?
Yeah, it's like a thing. It's up in all the toilets and stuff like that. And it's not even just for women. It's for men on dates as well. And if they feel like they're in a sticky situation, you go up to the bar and you ask for to speak to Angela, and they phone you a taxi, basically.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been going for maybe, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years now that I know of. And it's just one of these, safe words, but in a much better connotation than we would normally use.
Right. No, that's awesome. I kind of came of age of drinking in Chico, California. And if you don't know anything about this place, it's just literally, it was like, on the Playboy's top party schools for like all of the 80s and most of the 90s. So it's just a party town. And I know that a lot of bartenders have like specific drinks that you could order if you needed like some guy to go away, but it wasn't universal like that. So you'd be like, what bar am I at? And what is that code drink? Especially if you're inebriated, you're like, oh God.
You just end up with another cocktail by mistake. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've changed topics slightly there, but never mind. It's fine. So like I said before, thank you very much for getting on board with the new Twisted Britain's kind of challenge theme. And what I'm going to start doing now from other people is ask them who they think I should be asking to do a challenge. Now, I'm happy to go Dream World. Who would be the best person you think I should ask to do a Twisted Britain challenge?
I think the girls from Ladies of Strange would come up with something fun for you for sure.
That's a good one, yeah. And I'm
pretty sure that, or Alyssa from Fatalities.
Oh yeah, she's great too. You should definitely reach out to her and ask her. And she's so fun. Oh my gosh, she'd come up with something really interesting for you for sure.
Definitely.
I will absolutely add them to my list then. Yeah, that's cool. I'll not keep you guys too long. What I will say to you is thank you very much for the challenge. It was eye-opening on many levels. That's the thing I found the most about. I know it's only been 3. Well, I've written 5 now. And the best thing I've found about doing these things is A, I don't need to start coming up with a topic title, which is a nice thing to do. And B, I'm finding some weird shit that makes me not want to go to other places.
Yeah, no, thank you for including us. I love the new format. You're doing a really great job. So I'm really excited to see what everybody else has lined up for you.
Thank you very much. And if you're ever wanting a across the pond guest for Spooked Girls, I would be honoured to join you for that if you ever find a reason to do so.
Definitely. We're thinking of some ideas, so you're on my short list. So we got you.
Sweet, I like
for sure.
And if you ever decide to, travel probably about the same distance east than you go south, just knock the door. You probably wouldn't be that far away from here. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and we'll catch up again soon.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
So that was a fun wee chat. I mean, it went off on a bit of a tangent there in the middle. However, I will take this opportunity to say Ask for Angela is a running scheme in most pubs in Britain. And if you ever feel uncomfortable on a date, go up to the bar and ask for Angela, and you will be instantly safe again. But it was great to chat with Tara and Jess. I've been kind of wanting to do that for a long time, and it's great that we could find a reason to do so. I can't stress enough how much, if you enjoy Twisted Britain, you should go and check out what 3 Spooked Girls are doing, because not only do they release twice a week, which means there's always something lined up for you to listen to. I think it's a Monday and a Thursday off the top of my head when it comes out. But they cover the same kind of stuff as we used to do with Nadine, all the kind of paranormal, and they've done some really heavy hitters in their episodes recently. The Kemper episodes were incredibly good. I really enjoyed them. And they are wonderful to listen to. So you should all go and listen anyway. So moving on slightly, as I said, we have Raymond, better known as Ruck, who, might I say, is probably one of the biggest supporters of independent podcasting that I have ever had the chance to have a blether with. He is a big follower of everything and anything independent. I was going to say Twisted there. He's a big fan of everything Twisted, but he's a very big fan of independent podcasting and the support indie podcast movement. So you will see him pop up recommending Twisted Britain almost every week, and he is almost guaranteed to leave me a wonderful review after every episode on Podchaser, which is overly kind of him. He has set me, as I said, a challenge that has led itself for me to tell something I already had written. I'm just having a look down at my script and notes, and it was written. I wrote this originally when I was supposed to do it with Nadine, so I'm gonna read through it and hope it flows well. I'm sure it will. and we will see how it goes. But first of all, here is Raymond's challenge.
Hi there, and welcome to 5 and 30. Oh, wait, no, this is not my show. Oops, that is what I get for doing this right when I wake up. Anyways, hello, I'm Raymond, or Ruckland if you prefer, from the aforementioned 5 and 30 podcast. I met Bob on the Cast Junkie Discord server and fell in love with Twisted Britain. So when he asked me to help him out with one of these intros for the new show format, I jumped at the chance. Okay, jump's the wrong word. I loved the idea, but I kept getting sidetracked or busy. So while I meant to have this done so much sooner, it has taken me way too long to get it recorded, and I'm sorry, Bob. But here I am now, and I've been thinking long and hard about what to give you for a challenge. I thought I'd settle on something being pigs, but it didn't really work for me. Then it dawned on me, Bob, you had been telling us before the rebooting of the show about spies. So yes, Bob, my word for you is spy. Good luck, mate. I'm so happy with how the new format is turning out and can't wait to talk to you soon.
So those of you that have been long-time listeners knew that before Nadine decided that she was going to take a step back from the podcast, I'd started a kind of mini-series on spies and espionage, and mainly the people that had been sent to the firing squad at the Tower of London during the First and the Second World War. So that, luckily, is the story I'm going to tell you tonight. So I'm very kind of Ruckland to do that, because I couldn't think of a way of telling these stories that I kind of had lined up without just putting them on Patreon. And because I'd said in the podcast I was going to do them, this is an excellent chance for me to at least do one of them. Hopefully in the future we'll find a way of telling the other ones, because they're all incredibly interesting stories. And as for those of you that have listened before, you'll know I'm a fan of the historical stuff. So to me, 1914 is one of the most recent stories you would usually tell. However, with the reboot, just finding things to fulfill the challenges as such, they've been slightly more modern stories. So I'm very happy to carry on my wee series on spies who were executed in the Tower of London. And what I thought I'd do is I'd go right back to the beginning and talk about the first German to be executed, Carl Lody. Now, although there's a big thank you to Ruckland for suggesting this, I'd also like to give a big shout out to Daniel Freer, who's a member of the Facebook discussion group. And Daniel was the person that brought the Spies in the Tower of London to my attention after he'd kind of visited the Tower of London itself. And he posted a couple of photos and said, these would be a cool stories, and with all the brass plaques and everything like that. So a big thank you to Daniel for that. So the 6th of November 1914 broke cold, foggy and bleak, and at a very early hour, Lody was brought from his cell, and the grim procession formed up on the veranda of the Tower main guard. It was led by the chaplain, solemnly reading the burial service, followed by the prisoner, with an armed escort marching on either side of him, and the firing party of 8 stalwart guardsmen bringing up the rear. Nobody liked this sort of thing. It was altogether too cold-blooded for an ordinary stomach, particularly that of a soldier who hates cold-bloodedness. It's not too much to say of that sad little procession. The calmest and most composed member was the condemned man himself. A few moments later, the procession disappeared through the doorway of the sinister shed, and shortly after that came the muffled sounds of a single volley. Carl Lody had paid. Those are the words of John Fraser, who was a yeoman warder in 1914. So that was him basically recounting the morning that Carl Lody was taken to the firing squad from his cell. And it makes it sound very grand. And in fact, a lot more grand than the actions of Carl that had led him to become the first man executed in the Tower in 138 years. I'd like you to take note of the date that he was taken to be executed, which was the 6th of November 1914. And that's really only about 2 months after the outbreak of the First World War in Europe. So he'd managed to not only become the first man executed in the Tower of London, but it only took him 2 months to be captured, tried, and sent to execute. He wasn't very good at his job. So before we get into what happened in those 2 months, who was Carl? Well, Carl was actually German. Now, if you've had the chance to listen to my other episodes on spies, one of them was on Patreon and the other one was a regular release. none of them were German. There was an Argentinian and, oh my goodness, I can't remember. But either way, Carl was the first actual German. He was born in Berlin on the 20th of January, 1877. His father was a lawyer who worked for the German government and had then later taken a job as a mayor of a small town not far from Berlin. Not long after taking the job as mayor, Carl's father died of a short illness in 1883, and his mother passed away 2 years later. So, as of the age of 8, Carl was left as an orphan, and after a short time in foster care, he ended up in an orphanage. During his time in the orphanage, he worked as an apprentice in a shop in Halle. 1893, and Carl gets a job as a cabin boy on the sailing ship Sirius. While there, he studied at the German Maritime Academy, gaining a qualification as a helmsman. And as soon as he got his qualification, he applied for and was accepted into the Imperial German Navy, where he served for a year before joining the Naval Reserves and gaining his captain's license to serve as a captain on German merchant ships. So not a bad start to life, really. You know, by the age of 20, he's serving as a captain in the German merchant navy. However, this was a short-lived career, and due to complications after surgery, which I think was for a stomach ulcer, he was left with conditions that meant he had to retire from his post as captain. He did manage to get a job on another ship, this time working as a tour guide on the Hamburg America line, which was basically a kind of cruise liner for the wealthy Germans that would travel between Germany and the USA. And this happened in 1905 when he was about 28 years old. During one of his tours, he met a woman by the name of Louise Storrs, who was 23-year-old daughter of a wealthy brewing family in Omaha. Now, I had a quick look in to see what brewery that was in Omaha. And if I find it, I'm going to keep looking. If I find it, I'll post a link. I really hope they're still producing beers because I'd like to try one. But to be honest, I just like beer. But either way, him and Louise fell quite quickly in love. And during the tour that they were on, which was stopping at several European countries, the pair became engaged. And after visiting Berlin, they returned to the USA to be married in a rather swanky wedding that was even covered by the local press. Maybe like the kind of Hello magazine marriage of the time. Despite its rather fairy tale start, it didn't carry on that way. In fact, they were only together 2 months before they were separated, and in fact ended up in court, with Louise stating that Carl had beaten her. Carl fled the country and returned back to Germany. However, he did go back to the US with a lawyer to contest the case, but there seems to have been an agreement made between him and his father-in-law that I will surmise as, take this money and fuck off. So off he went back to Germany with his wallet stuffed. So he's back in Germany around 1912, 1913. Now, I will stress here, I am no war expert, but I know for a fact that towards the end of 1913 and into the start of 1914, there was maybe a bit of tension building up around Europe. Without going into too much about the starts of the war and all that kind of hoo-ha, because that's another topic for another day. Let's just say that during 1914, the German naval services started to look for appropriate people to become agents. Carl was already known to the intelligence service, as during his time in the Navy, he had worked under Arthur Tapken, who later became the director of the intelligence service. And as such, Carl had been marked as a possible agent before the outbreak of war. Basically, anybody who'd worked for the tour companies on a boat was considered to be a good target for to become an agent, as they knew how the ports worked. They generally had a good grasp of English, and they kind of knew how the high society worked. And Carl had the added bonus of already having been a naval officer. Carl was approached officially in May of 1914 and told them it would be of his honour to serve. He was first asked to travel through the south of France, reporting back his findings to Berlin. But at the outbreak of war, he was redeployed and was tasked with travelling to Leith in Edinburgh to monitor British naval ship movement in the area. But before we jump ahead to Leith, let's have a wee think about what the fuck has just happened. A former Navy man with an injury who then worked as a tour guide has been asked to monitor one of the UK's biggest shipping ports and report back to Berlin. But he's only been working them for 2 months, and his previous role had been a game of what's going on in France. Not much training there. His most important, most important ability was his grasp of the English language, and the fact that he was asked about the danger. And in fact, here's a quote from Gustav Steiner, who was the head of the German intelligence service. German intelligence, British division, my apologies. When you are in London, Lody, you are not in Germany or France with neutral frontier close at hand to assist your escape. You will have to get through a port, and it will not be easy. It will mean death if you are in the slightest degree of careless. You must remember that all foreigners will be watched everywhere. Your correspondence will be opened, your luggage will be ransacked, and they will go over your passport with a microscope to see that it is not forged. And they will make you notify every change of address that you have. His response to this was, well, after all, one might as well die that way as any other. I shall be rendering the fatherland a service, and no other German can do more than that. Carl sets off to Scotland with his American passport in the name of Charles Ingalls and enough money to make it rain. In fact, he set off so quickly that he hadn't even learned any codes or secret ways of writing that he could be used to send encrypted messages. When he stopped in Edinburgh in Leith, it was August of 1914, and he was tasked with spying and documenting the Firth of Forth, which, as I said, was not only the main access to Scotland's capital, but it was also the place where the Navy were using as a holding area for quite a few ships. The Firth of Forth is a huge body of water. It's quite deep in the middle, and it's still to this day have huge ships sailing up the Forth to Grangemouth, which is a big oil refinery, and the size of the boats that come up the Forth are incredible. So I can imagine that they could easily fit a load of naval ships in there, thinking they're hidden. So he's supposed to document the movement and the general information on the British fleet, trying to find out what was there and what the potential plans may be for the ships. However, as I have already alluded, he had little to no training in espionage, so he wasn't very good. In fact, he used standard means of communications to send back his findings, telegrams and letters sent through neutral countries back to Germany. But that's not a way that's going to work, as he's already been told by his superiors. Every letter you send will be scrutinised, along with every movement that he makes, as he's a foreigner. But that seems to have passed Carl's caring or inability to give a fuck. Who knows? But it's one of the things that will lead to his downfall. As I said at the beginning, Carl only lasted 2 months before ending up in the Tower of London, and at this point, he's still 500 miles away from there. So how did he get caught? Well, as I alluded to before, Carl wasn't the most talented of spies. And by all accounts that I can read, he was also one to take rumours and just report them as facts. Carl was, in fact, kind of detected by his first communications back to the fatherland. He was sending letters back via Stockholm. Some of his letters managed to get through because they contained information that didn't really contain enough information for the British services to be worried about it. But some of the things he wrote were just odd, really. Like I say, he was detected in his first letter sent back, as he used to sign them as Charles or the Nazi. He sent letters in a combination of both English and German, and one of the letters he sent was reporting of Russians being in Britain. The letter itself read, "Will you kindly communicate with Berlin at once by wire, code, or whatever system at your disposal, and inform them that on September the 3rd, great masses of Russian soldiers have passed through Edinburgh on their way to London and France. Although it must be expected that Berlin has knowledge of these movements, which probably took its start at Archangel. It may be well to forward this information. It is estimated here that 60,000 men have passed, numbers which seem greatly exaggerated. I went to the depot and noticed trains passing through at high speed, blinds down. The landing in Scotland took place at Aberdeen. Yours very truly, Charles." Now, this was absolute nonsense. None of this actually happened, as anybody who's aware of what happened in the First World War would know. Russians did not troop en masse from Aberdeen down to London. So, to me, that suggests he was just taking rumours and reporting them as fact. Carl started being suspicious that his landlady had worked out who he was and decided to set off to Dublin. He travelled to the port of Liverpool, where he reported on in great detail on the ships there. And this time, his letter was intercepted because it did contain information that was valuable to be not told to the Germans. Arriving in Dublin, he wrote several more letters which were intercepted by the British postal handlers, and these were also shown to be containing valuable information. So at this point, the British decided that it's about time we should deal with this man. Even though they didn't know his actual identity, they knew where he was and what he was doing. So the Royal Irish Constabulary were given instructions on the 2nd of October to go and visit his hotel later that day and arrest him. When he was arrested, he was found to be carrying some German gold with a notebook in his pocket detailing British ships, and his big giveaway was a receipt in his suit pocket from a tailor in Berlin which contained his real name. Lody was transported to London and sent to the Tower. He was at this point put on trial for war treason, which wasn't a very well-used charge at the time, because obviously we were at the start of the war, and they'd never used a war treason charge against anybody, especially not spies. But it basically treated espionage in all forms as a war crime and was instantly punishable by the death penalty. In trial, Carl Lody admitted in court that he had been a spy and that he had been sent to Britain by his superiors. He, however, refused to give up the name of the person who recruited him, saying, "That name I cannot say, as I have given my word of honour." So it's nice to know that he had a bit of honour, but he was just a bit dim. However, this was the only trial during the First and Second World War of espionage that was tried in public, and it was hugely reported in the press. He was hugely patronistic, and because of that, it kind of attracted huge following in the press. It didn't take them very long to convict him of war treason, mainly because he went, "Yeah, I did that," and he was sent to the Tower to be executed. As I said earlier in the quotes from the Yeoman Guards, he seemed to be the bravest man on the morning of his execution, and is reported to have said to his the officer that was to escort him from his cell, "I suppose that you will not care to shake the hands with a German spy." The officer replied, "No, but I will shake hands with a brave man." He was led to what is called earlier the Sinister Shed, which is literally just a kind of a wooden building in Execution Green at the Tower of London, and taken inside the shed, offered the same chair as all the others were, where he sat and received a volley from 8 Scots guards. He did, whilst in imprisonment in the Tower, write a couple of letters. One of these he wrote to the commanding officer of the firing squad. It read, "Sir, I feel it my duty as a German officer to express my sincere thanks and appreciation toward the staff of officers and men who were in charge of my persons during my confinement. Their kind and considerate treatment has called my highest esteem and admiration as regard to good fellowship, and even towards the enemy. And if I may be permitted, I would like to thank you for making this known to them." Which is takes a wonderfully proud man to say that. Thank you very much for the way you've done. And it also speaks highly of the way they were treating people and prisoners of war at the time. It is still very early in the war, and I wouldn't imagine that everybody was treated beautifully throughout imprisonment. And I speak for that on both sides, both... I was going to say the axis of evil, but that's not quite right, is it? It's both the Allies and the Germans. I would imagine they treated people slightly better at the start when it was a gentleman's war, shall we say. But as I said earlier, on the morning of the 6th of November 1914 was Hans Lodey's last day. Lody is buried in an unmarked grave in the East London in an East London cemetery, which also took the bodies of all the other spies to be executed throughout the war. It wasn't until after the war in 1924 that a grave was marked, and the headstone, however, in a feat of irony, was destroyed by a Luftwaffe bomb in the Second World War. There was a second headstone erected in 1974, and it stands to this day. That is the story of the first man executed in the Tower of London since 1780. It was, however, not the last, and there were, throughout the First World War, 11 German spies executed at the Tower of London. I do recommend anybody who is in the London area to go and have a look at the bronze plaques and the chair that's on display. That shows you. It's a kind of really stark reminder of a different time and of, I'm not going to say brutality, because it's not. It's a brutal end to a man's life, but it's also, I'm going to say out loud, a just punishment for somebody who was trying to infiltrate and deceive an entire nation. So I'd like to thank Ruckland for allowing me to tell this story, and I'd like to thank Daniel again for bringing this to my attention. It's been a fun one. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to get around to doing some of the other spies, not all 11 of them, but maybe we'll get a chance to tell you one again if I can fit it into a Twisted challenge. So thank you very much for listening to Twisted Britain today. It's been a pleasure to tell you this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do hit us up online if there's anything you want to add to it or ask about it. I'll put a couple of photos up of the letters and such over the next week or so. If you would like to get a bit more involved and chatty with myself, please do go onto social media and find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You'll find me at Twisted Britain on all of them. And if you'd like to join our ever-growing group of wonderful people in the Twisted Britain discussion group, you'll find us on Facebook just by searching for Twisted Britain discussion group. It's a great place to kind of chat with other people who are into twisted stories, and feel free to suggest something for me, and if I can find it into a challenge, I will do. To anyone who is a Patreon member, there will be the first Patreon episode of the year going out this weekend as well. And this is a different one. What I've decided to do with our Patreon episodes is tell the weird and twisted stories that I find that I wouldn't normally be able to fit into a challenge. And I've got a couple of, I think it's 2 stories this weekend, and they're a bit odd. It was an overhearing of a conversation in a pub, and I went, "Excuse me, what were you talking about?" And if you'd like to know more, please do sign up to Patreon, and you'll be able to get access to all of our back episodes on there. There are several different tiers, everything from thank you very much to right through to being a top level Patreon. And our top level patrons I will hopefully be hitting up at some point soon to do a challenge for the show. As always, I'd like to finish with a thank you, love you, bye, and I'll see you all soon. Cheerio.